Developed over quite a long time and are very antiquated from today's perspective on. So it's similar in the case of Airbnb, where they're circumventing the rules that have been formed for hotels and renting out rooms, with the consequence that if you live in a building where there's 5 to 6 Airbnb apartments, then the only thing you can do is move out because there's not going to be any silence anymore. So the consequences of these circumventions are only becoming clear right now, and they actually have one focus, one center, one core. So in the past, my grandma used to say, "Oh, but if everyone did that," that's something my grandma used to say. If you do something bad, the thing is, the internet and the way we can connect. Everyone does these things. So every stupid shit that we come up with, any way we manage to find holes in regulations to circumvent regulations, this is something that's reproducible on a huge scale simply because of the size of the internet. So everything you can think of on possibilities to use loopholes and to turn this into a business model is something that in most cases is reproducible on a huge scale without a problem. And that's something we need to deal with because we can't turn the clock back. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. We just need to get used to this and we need to prepare ourselves for this. Another area where we are affected by the consequences of the technologies is the separation of labor. We have the situation that labor is now separated, distinguishable in different parts more parts than before. So we can distinguish things into incredibly small parts, like delivering parcels. So what's happening is that these cars are actually being remotely steered by technology. Someone wrote the software, and this software is now writing rules on how to deliver these parcels and which parcels are supposed to deliver where. And what's behind this is that as soon as you're part of a system like this, you only have the possibility to kind of use the system and circumvent the system. So, for example, if you go on the website of a parcel delivery service in Germany, then the question is, why are there parcels that are supposed to be delivered until 12? Well, these parcels actually have a high probability of not being delivered that very day, because if the driver doesn't actually manage to send out these parcels and give them and deliver them, then he gets minus points. So he actually looks at all the parcels that he hasn't been able to deliver. He just logs that he wasn't able to meet the customers. He doesn't really have a choice, because if he simply can't deliver these parcels until 12, then he would earn significantly less money. So it's simply physically not possible. So these ways of organizing and people being steered by ticket systems, essentially, that's something that's being more and more popular. And this outsourcing into small sub-companies, something that you will know from the digital area, this is something where self-exploitation actually becomes the rule. It's everyone against everyone, which I personally don't really like. So as a matter of principle, it should be a great new world. In principle, we could have more freedom, more independence, more money. So if we use these technologies in a positive way and prevented them from being used in ways that we might not want them to be used in, then this world could be amazing. Another area of the work This is a slide that Volkswagen published a while ago. And the question is, how much do you pay for a robot per hour? So we remember
and we can see what robots actually cost us. It's all-inclusive. Also, like using it, payment for power, energy you need. It's usually not getting more expensive than 11.40 per hour with a robot. And what this means is that things that can be automated will be automated at some point. But we have to handle that. And if you look at the trends now, at Volkswagen, we can see that there's a positive thing about this, that the part of qualified workers who actually have to think, to be creative, they are growing, and it's a positive thing that people get classes to learn better jobs, to get away from just pushing out metal and doing stuff. The number of people who are actually working is shrinking, and the number of robots in auto building exceeds the number of workers, and it was 2012, and we are a lot further now. But the bad news is that the brain activities aren't really safe from this. In the mental work, many things get like automated, and many things are. There are people who stand at the who just write texts for internet portals. It's not really amazing what they are doing, and it's not really safe from being automated. Some texts would be better if they are made from structured data with algorithms. And we have to arrange with this situation, and we can't stop it. We can't really stop it, but really we want to see the positive things about this. Another field where we're getting more problems is data ethics. This data security is also a word what I want to mention. We generate more and more data about ourselves, about the single persons, but also the groups. We can have a full DNA, and we can see when it's possible to see how many neurons we have in our brains, and to get thinking structures. The mass of data that can be taken from us, it's growing further and further. And at some point we might be completely digital, but we have to handle that, and we didn't really learn that. And the problem is we're only at the beginning of this transformation. The situation is that we have artificial intelligence that's basically on the level of a pet, to find a good comparison, like Schäferhund. And at some point this will
This is probably going to replace people, and we're getting away from where you need experience, where you need to have this experience. So the network effects of what we're seeing right now, digitalizations, computer power that's accessible everywhere. So all these are possibilities. We are far, far from using all of this potential. So we're only at the very beginning of all the developments that are still about to come. So the question how we as a society want to deal with this is still unanswered. We have politicians who are like kind of talking about this for themselves. I don't want to insult Mr. Oettinger, but honestly, you do not really have the impression that these problems are in the best hands there, and that's where the intellectual impulses are coming from, how we need to deal with these things as a society. So we need modernized base rules for regulation in the digital age. And in my opinion, the starting point for this should be a positive definition of how we want to live. We as a society should find out for ourselves how we want to live, which things we like, what we like about life, what possibilities of development are, what we consider to be fair, what we consider to be just. And based on this, we should start to define these base rules for regulation completely unrelated from all these technologies. So these tools, the tools that we will get and that we have already gotten in many cases, these tools are able to completely change the way we live and to completely change our world in a utopian but also a dystopian way. So if we do not have a positive vision and we do not develop a positive vision of this future, and we don't develop this utopia, then we won't ever attain this utopia. So I will make a few propositions. So based on maybe the most universal possible baselines that we consider the base of our civilization. So maybe we have the German Basic Law, Article 1. Human dignity is untouchable. What does it mean in the digital age? So in my opinion, something very basic. Profit can never be more important than human dignity. So whenever you have a business model, a structure, or generally a business idea would lead to human dignity being affected, to people being forced into labor situations that are not dignified and that are not actually according to how we want people to work, then in those moments we need to do something against these things, against the business model, not against the technology. The technology is just a tool that is being used. The technology is probably being determined by how things are being happening, but it's in the end only the expression of the will of people who want things to be a certain way and who, when in doubt, don't really care about other people's dignity and about how the dignity of people they're using is being harmed. So the General Declaration on Human Rights is something that you might want to read from time to time. It's pretty old and might need a renewal by now, but there are some very basic things written down in there. So actually every person has the right to work, to the freedom of choosing his job, and to proper work conditions. So how does this fit together with the possible or current development of our the world of labor that we're seeing right now? So this is a very central point of social conflict that we see in the future. So for example, the workers' associations won't be able to. They don't have another choice. They need to get away from a non-inclusive point of view on these things, but they need to get to a point where they're, as the association of workers, because they're the only ones who could do these things, these associations need to define what is good work, what is good labor, what are good working conditions, and what is a possible protection from unemployment. And they need to positively demand these things and shouldn't only do these things within the regulations and laws that we already have, but they need to do these things as political demands, because if they don't, they will become irrelevant anyway. That would be a shame. But in the end, that's exactly the question that we need to ask. How is work defined in a positive way? How do we want to work? And what do we consider undignified work? So this question is really important. This needs to be in the focus of societal discussion. So this positive definition of work also needs a discussion on the question of falling wages and the automation of work. So by now, the state is being financed to 2/3 out of the taxes that are being of human labor being taxed. So in the end, the question is like, who's going to buy all these things that robots will be producing in the future? I think this is actually possible. So there's a chance for positive development. There are a few ideas that we already have that already consider that we have a demographic change in Germany that will lead to less people working anyway. So that makes the whole thing a bit easier, but doesn't really solve the problem of how we should finance our society. A very basic part of our basic law, and very central part of it, is that nobody should be discriminated against based on their gender, where they come from, their race, their language, their home, or their religious beliefs. So this means that the question of how systems behave in the face of humans is something that becomes incredibly relevant. So, in my opinion, something that belongs to this question as well. is how do companies react, how do state entities react to people about whom they have a lot of information. So an old example is credit scoring, but in the end there's a lot more. So we need to deal with the problem that data is power over people, and power tends to discriminate. So we need to get to a point where we come up with new rules. We can't only be standing where the current data protection laws are standing right now, which is only regulating how data is collected, but we need to go further. And we need to say that entities who know a lot about people, who know a lot about single people, and who can know a lot because they have all this data, these entities need to be regulated in a much harder way than entities that, for example, don't know that many things. So maybe we need to get used to a way of thinking that's a bit comparable to how we think about nuclear material. If you have these tons of radioactive material, then you might get the idea that this place should maybe be regulated. If you only have a very small amount in the laboratory, then well, sure, that's kind of okay. Be a bit careful, but we don't need incredibly tough regulation for this person. So the question how to implement this logic is quite difficult when it comes to the details. But it works because it's not only applicable to companies, but also to secret services. So these secret services are entities that have an incredibly huge amount of data, like the US, but also the Chinese, the Russians, or the Germans. Using this data, they're actually capable of finding out a lot, if not everything, about the life of a single person. If they actually do this, it's actually irrelevant for this point of view. The only thing that's clear is that these entities need to be regulated in an incredibly tough way. So how data is used, regulation of how data is used, what they're doing with this data, what do they do with these information they have about me, what conclusions do you draw, and how do you earn money with this? This is the next step. These two things cannot be separated. So first of all, who has which data about me, which information, how many? So the more data they have, the more we need to look at it. And then the second question is, what do they do with it? Do they discriminate? Do they exclude people? Do they do things that make the life of other people worse? So in those cases, we also need regulation. So this transparency of usage is something that we really need to implement as well. So if we look at the current situation, we have a place where huge entities like, NSA or Facebook and everyone else, these entities who have a lot of data, about people, and they're using this data are incredibly intransparent. We have no idea what's happening in there. We don't know which conclusions they're drawing. We don't have any insight into how they influence our lives with these data, if they are discriminating, and that's where we need transparency. The baseline needs to be that a single person needs to have the right to protect their own privacy, and these big entities need to be as transparent as possible, and if needed, we need to intervene. If there is not, if we don't come to a satisfactory conclusion. In the end, the question which possibilities we have, and if we need to approach this in a technological way or not, it's actually too late for these questions. So right now we need to look at the consequences and need to be able to deal with these consequences. But at the same time, we shouldn't stop thinking about regulating how data is being obtained and collected. So the last area from my propositions concerns freedom of expression and communication. So again, the General Declaration of Human Rights is, we have it here, it's very universal. So everyone should have the right to communicate freely and to freely say their opinion. So we have a situation where from a Western perspective that might be possible in most cases. Nevertheless, we can assume that the way we communicate, the way we inform ourselves is something that's being changed by technological change. And these things will have the consequence of people being excluded if you don't have enough money, if you live in the wrong area of our world, if you don't necessarily belong to the right social circle, and that might be a reason for you to be excluded from information or communication. I personally think that this is something where we need a further development of public sources of information and information dissemination. So in the hacker ethic, we have a sentence that says, you should have access to computers and everything what can show us how the world works. And the conclusion is we need a positive, big vision that's based on general on a general ground, and it has to be the basis for rules and rulings. And this vision is a collective job, and it doesn't have to be based on special technologies. You have to look at the might you have with all these knowledge, and you have to make sure that the technology can't really be worked around. And we all have to participate, and we have to join as many people as possible. And it's going to be a long process in our society, but it's necessary to come over this whole just sticking together of things. And this is where I end my talk.